Yep. Good evening, everyone. So last session we had some doubts discussion and all. So hope you practiced all. You tried material UI also. You tried some components in material UI. I asked you to try some material UI components. Now today we will see how do we work with React hooks. How do we deal with React hooks? So generally working with React hook, first basic point is hook is a function. Hook is a function that returns any value or expression, that returns a value or expression. So technically hook is a function. So what is the purpose of this function is usually hooks are designed for, so it is designed for handling reusability, maintainability, extensibility, etc. All these things you can manage by using hooks. Suppose you want certain functionality to happen with certain rules to happen in every location. Then instead of writing a function, you can create it like a hook. What is advantage? You can inject in any component and you can use it. Actually, React have introduced this concept from React 17 version. Before React 17, we don't have React hooks. We have only lifecycle hooks. Lifecycle hooks are related to class. I told you unmount, mount, those are related to lifecycle. So React introduced hooks from the version 17. From 17 version onwards, hooks are available. And as we discussed that hook is a function, that is the reason you cannot use hook in a class component. So hooks can be used only in function components. Because can we define a function as a member of any class? No. Class member cannot be a function. Class member must be a method or a property or an accessor or a constructor. Only 4 members are allowed in a class. If only 4 members are allowed in a class, so function cannot be a class member, variable cannot be a class member, already we discussed. So hooks are not allowed in classes. So if you are designing class components, then you have to use alternative. That means you have to use third parties. You need to depend on alternative techniques for managing these kind of tasks. So, but function components can use these hooks. They can access and use the hooks. What is the main purpose? We can easily reuse the logic. without rewriting the logic. We can reuse the logic and we can easily implement in any location. That is the main concept of hook. So you cannot use hook in class component. So hooks are only for function components, are only for function component. You cannot use in class components. And very important point is, when you are dealing with hooks, there are certain rules. I will tell you those rules while creating hook. Actually, React provides several predefined hooks, and also allows to create custom hooks. Custom hooks means we can create our own hook. Already React is having ready-made hooks built in. You can use those hooks. For example, so React built-in hooks, predefined hooks are, you learned so many, like you have use state, you have like use effect. What else? What else hooks you use it? We used use state, we used use effect. We learned so many. We learned use cookies. Use cookies is related to cookie creation. We learned use params. Use params are related to accessing route parameters, right? So these all are built-in hooks. These are predefined. We used use navigate. These are all hooks, built-in hooks. So React provides a lot of predefined hooks, but remember, all doesn't belong to React library. Some related to routing library, some related to cookies library, different libraries. So what we have done, we imported those libraries and we used those hooks. So React inbuilt have some base hooks, and React also allows to create our own hooks. You can create your own hook. Suppose in companies, when you are working on projects, you will come across with a hook and you will think that I haven't learned this. So why you haven't learned that hook? Because that is not a built-in hook. That is the hook created by those people to handle certain situation in their project. Such custom hooks, even you Google, you will not get any help on them. Why? Because those hooks are not available. Those hooks are created manually, explicitly, according to their project requirements. You will come across with such hooks, lot of them. So don't think that every hook is built by React, because React is open source community. Lot of third-party hooks are there. It's not necessary that you have to know all the hooks, and it's not possible. Why? Because they are all not React native. They belong to different third parties. Even if I haven't told you about cookies, you will never know about use cookies, because use cookies is not a React hook. It is a hook provided by React cookie library. If we haven't learned routing, then we don't know about use params, use navigate. So we have different types of built-in hooks. We can create our own hooks also. We can configure. How to create a custom hook, I will show you. We will see that, right? Now, technically, so we will see how to work with some of important hooks. So we will see some important hooks which are regularly required. Already we know them. First, I will give you some basic point. What is the first hook you learned? Use state. What is the purpose of this? So it configures a state for component where you can store a value and use it from any location, So from any location in the component, So it configures a state for component where you can store a value and use it from any location inside the component. So already we learned it defines mutable. Am I right? It defines mutable data structure. Mutable means you can change the data structure. So why can't we store directly in variable? Because variables are immutable. Syntax we already know. No need to explain. What is the syntax? We have a constant, we have a getter, and we have a setter, and is equal to use state here. And here you can define any indicates any type of value. So it can be primitive type or non-primitive. That means, so any refers to primitive or non-primitive type. You can define any primitive or non-primitive type. Now, very important is how do we configure the state? How do we define the state? Already we learned in so many examples. Sometimes in interviews, they ask like constant, we have a getter and use state. Is it valid? So is it valid? It is valid, but it is read only. That means whatever data you defined is read only. You cannot change. So if anybody asked you like how you can configure read only state by just using a getter, wherever you don't use a setter. If there is no setter, that means it is only get. You cannot define value into it, define value. So that is important, how you can configure. And very important, so remember, this is actually every hook allocates memory and initializes value into memory. This is the hook nature. Every hook, what it will do, it allocates memory and it will initialize value into memory. Every hook is going to initialize value. Remember here, very important, hook is not assigning value. It is not assigning value. Every hook nature is not assigning value. It is initializing value. It is not assigning the value. So it is what? Initialization of value. That means what you have done, for example, you defined constant, some params is equal to params is equal to use params. We have used use params. So this is what you are assigning any value into it. We are not assigning any value into it. What we are doing, this indicates we are initializing memory. We are initializing memory. That is constructor, na? That is the constructor. But generally, it is not constructor here, it is function memory. It is allocating memory for the function so that into the memory, you can initialize some values. Initialize some values. That is very important. That is the reason. So if anybody asked you a question like, right? So the question is like, you are declaring a constant and you are storing some value into it, right? And you can store different values into it, but constant cannot assign values now. If constant cannot assign values, how you are assigning different values into it? Actually, this is very basic concept for everybody who learned hooks, right? It becomes a complicated question if you don't have knowledge on hooks, right? The basic hook, for anybody who learned hooks concept, he knows this. He knows that this is not assigning value. It is initializing value. Is it assigning value? It is not assigning value. It is what? Initializing value. That means you are using, what is it? Setter. Na? What setter will do? It will use set state. Right? You are using some set state. Into that set state, you are passing value. Or you are assigning value. You are not assigning value. What you are doing? You are initializing value. Understood? Huh? So every hook initializes value. It will not assign value. Right? Assigning, you know the syntax of assigning. Assigning is this. We are not assigning value. So into the setter, what we are doing, we are initializing. So a constant can be initialized any number of times. You learned in JavaScript. If you learn JavaScript in JavaScript itself, you will learn this point. Constant is not about read only. Read only is different. Constant is different. Can a constant value change? A constant value can change. When it will change? At the time of initializing. This is a very basic JavaScript concept. So this is very simple and very straightforward point. You are not assigning values. You are initializing the values. All hooks are same. So use state is going to handle this. This is a simple point. No need to give example. Already you know. Already you know how to use state. Next important, use effect. Use effect. So what is the purpose of this use effect? What you learned about use effect? Use effect, it defines actions to perform on component mount and unmount. So use effect is going to define actions to perform when component mount and unmount. Every component have two phases, a mount phase, another one unmount phase. Already in class component I showed you. In class component, who will manage that? Life cycle hooks. Life cycle hooks component did mount. Component will mount. Component will unmount. Those already I explained. That is related to what? Class component. So component did mount, unmount, or not possible in function component. So in function component, mount and unmount are managed by, in function component, mount and unmount are managed by use effect. Use effect. But how to write? How to write syntactically like this? We have use effect. It uses a callback function. This callback function have dependency, and this callback component is going to, here, this component is going to have here actions on mount. If you want actions on unmount, then we have to use return. Return uses another callback function. This return is going to define the actions on unmount. It defines actions on unmount. So why return defines actions on unmount? I hope you already learnt in JavaScript. Return is not a keyword for returning value. Already we learnt in functions now. What is the purpose of function return? What is the purpose of function return? Function return. What is the purpose of function return? Actually, suppose the purpose of function return, you return a function. So add a comma b and return a plus b. In JavaScript, you learned this return is not returning a plus b. It is not returning a plus b. Then what it is doing? Actually, in JavaScript, return is a jump statement. Return is a jump statement. And if you use return, the purpose of return is to terminate the program, is to terminate the compiling, is to terminate the memory allocated for function. That means before reaching the end of function, the function memory function, actually if it reaches end, the function memory ends. That means the memory allocated for function here, and the memory allocated for function will be destroyed here. It will be destroyed there. If you use return before that, the memory allocated function is not destroyed. Without destroying, it terminates the program here. And the memory of function is still available. In that memory, it will store a plus b. That is the meaning of return. Return is not returning a value. Return is avoiding the destruction of memory. In this case, it is avoiding the destruction of memory. That means actually it is stopping the compiling. It is stopping the compiling. If you write this return in use effect, it will stop the component. Return is going to stop the component. It will deallocate memory. Whatever memory is allocated, it will be destroyed. So any function can have this return. Return is not returning. Return is termination. It is destroying. Actually, if anybody asked what is difference between break and return, what is difference between break and return? Both are jump statements. So what is the difference between break and return? Why I can't use a break? For example, you learned all these in JavaScript, right? Suppose you have switch. Into the switch you are writing case, and the statement after that you are writing break. Instead of write, can I write case with return? Can we use case with return? Is it possible to use return for case? It is possible. You can use break or you can use return. In switch cases, you might have learned that in JavaScript. A JavaScript switch case can stop its block by using a return or by using a break. Then what is difference between them? You can have a break or we can have a return. What is difference between them? Actually, you see here, suppose I will add some file HTML. So here I'm writing some script, and here we defined script. Yeah, I'm writing a function, and in that we have var n is equal to 1, and here we are defining switch. Into that we pass n, and we have case. If case 1, then document dot write, it will print 1. After that I given break. If it is case 2, then document dot write, I entered 2. After that I used return. If the case 3, then document dot write, I entered 3. And after that I used break. Like this I am defined. I am using return after 2. I am using return after 2. Now you run this here. It is printing the statement we need to call. I will use here parse int. I will take value from a prompt, enter number, and I will call this function 1. Okay. Now you can see I refresh, it is asking enter number. I entered 3, then it prints 3. 3 is using break. I entered 2, then 2 is also using same, but 2 is using return. I am using 1, then 1 is also same, but 1 is using break. Then what is difference? Remember, switch requires a jump statement. That jump statement can be anything. It can be return or it can be break. And I hope you know, without break also you can define a case. Without break also you can define a case. Then it will continue to the next case. Then what is difference between break and return? Difference is nothing but break is going to terminate this block. After terminating the block, compiling is still in the function only. Compiler stays in the function. That means memory is not destroyed. It is still in the function so that it can use that function memory. It is still not destroyed. But when you say return, it will finish this block. It will delete the memory allocated. It will delete the memory allocated and it will come out of the function. You can see, generally that is a very general concept of JavaScript. You see here, I'm inspecting here. In the inspect, let's go to application, sources. In the sources, open this demo HTML. Here we will put a breakpoint. At line number 4, I kept a breakpoint. Let's refresh the page. Now it is asking enter number. I'm asking here, I'm using 1. Okay. Now it comes here. N is matching with which case first? Step over. Step over, it will come to first case. It will execute the statement. After executing the statement, see carefully. I click step over. When I click step over, it will come here, break. See what break will do. Step over. It is going to stay inside the function only. That means it is inside the function. Function is not destroyed. Okay. Let's do one thing. I will enter one more time. I will enter 2. And I say okay. Now it comes here. Step over. It comes to second case. After second case, step over. It comes to return. After return, step over. So when you say step over here, it will come out of the function. After return, it will come out of the function. Out of the function, out of script. That means the memory allocated for function is destroyed. That is simple. That is the point that use effect is doing. Use effect is a function. And if a function is having a return, what it will do? It will terminate the memory. So return is not returning values. Return is terminate. That is the meaning. Void means what? Void means you will tell no return type. Actually, void is not return type. Void means it says that the memory will not be destroyed. That means void indicates that memory will be destroyed. Sorry, memory will be destroyed. Return means memory is not actually destroyed. Before memory destroying, it will store your value. After that, it cleans up. So return indicates that I am going to terminate the execution. Whatever you write after return, it is not executed. It will stop. That is the reason if anyone writes like this, suppose you are writing a function. In this, we have document.write statement 1. After that, I return document.write statement 2. Statement 2. After that, I used document.write statement 3. We defined like this. Now, after second statement, I used return. That means it indicates that after second statement, stop. That is the meaning. Return is not returning any value. You can just use the return keyword anywhere you want. Inside a function, inside a block. Return indicates that it is going to stop the compiling. It is going to terminate. That is the meaning. So it will print only first two statements. Whatever you written after this return is not reachable to compiler. That is what actually written. So that is the reason when you design a component, let's see, I will add a component effects component, and here I will add effect so component .js, effects component.js, and here we are writing a simple logic like this: export so function and effects component. Okay, here it will return just a container. So we will keep here some just a button, say login. I will put another button, so say register. These two are present. We have login and register. Now what we will do, we will put a horizontal line, HR, that is horizontal line. Okay. We will keep this effects component in the startup. So we have effects component in the startup. Now the effects component is defined. So this effects component is returning some functionality here like this we have. Yeah, you have this login and register. I will just keep container fluid. Okay. And that is the component we are having. Fine. Now we will put one simple point there, like let's create another function, export function login. Login is another component. It returns a login screen. Just we will keep a div, and here we will put a heading user login. Similarly, I will create another component. So this I will define. So register, and here I will keep register new user. Just like this I define. Now this component is having use effect. Imported from the React library, we have use effect. Use effect, we are configuring a function, and here we are adding the dependencies currently empty. Here we are defining a simple option like alert. In the alert, we will say, so login component requested, because this is on mount phase. Login component requested. How to write unmount phase? We have to use a return. Return, what it should return. So here we will put an alert. Alert saying that login component unmounted. So here login component requested and will mount. This is the message. And login component is unmounted. On return, it is unmounting. Same logic I will keep in register, use effect. So here register component is requested and will mount. Another one, register component unmounted. Okay, here we will configure so constant. So we will define a layout or say component. So component and set component, and it uses use state, use state, use state, and this use state is a string type. Now what should happen? We will write function called login click. On login click, set component. It will set which component it will access login component like this. And if function, we will say register click. On register click, it will set component and which component register component will load. So we are defining and we are writing click and login. So we have to use on click. So it is login click. Here we need to define on click. This is register click. That is where to display component. Component must be displayed here. Here we need to render the component. Whatever component is there, it should come here. Now see what happens. We have mount and unmount phase for every component now. Now I am clicking on login component, login click. Then it says login component requested and will mount. I said okay. Then login component unmounts. Unmounts not now, just first time I refresh, it will come here because I reloaded once. Now see, when I click on register, what will happen first? When I register, login component will unmount. So when I click register, it says login component unmounted. That means it is destroyed. After destroying, which one register component is requested? That is the message it is handling. The register component will be displayed there. When I click on again login, first what will happen? Register component will be unmounted. After that, it will be mounted. So the same thing you have done in which location? In class component using mount and unmount. Here we don't have two different hooks. You have only use effect. Use effect can manage both mount as well as unmount. Unmount, generally where we need that, I already told you. Disconnecting from database, destroying the memory. So unsubscribing the methods and all such activities we do on unmount. So this is an example for that. This is an example. So in this example, we just designed a component and we mentioned mount phase and unmount. Any activity on mount, you write on use effect, and any activity on unmount, you have to define align. That's what you have to do, right? This is one simple example of understanding mount and unmount. What about dependency? Dependency also we learned. Dependency I showed you in routing example. In routing example, we discussed at that point. That means here important is, so usually you can say use effect. Use effect will load only once for request. it will load only once per request. So you can say once per request. It will load only once per request. That means actually use effect. It uses so singleton mechanism. It uses singleton mechanism. Singleton means it is created only once and it is used every number of time. But actually it is not right word. Just I explained the point because singleton comes with classes concept. Right here it is not a class, it is just a function. I just told you about pattern, what it is. Use effect will load only once per request. If you want to load it again, it loads only once. If you want to load it again, so that means the dependencies define when to mount the component again. That means what is the purpose of dependency? Dependency tells when to mount again. By default, it mounts how many times? Only once. You first requested, it will mount. Then how you handle this? So depending on mount phase, dependencies will mount again. So, and you can have multiple dependencies. Dependencies is nothing but it is an array of dependencies. It is an array of dependencies. Any dependency is changing, it will mount again. What is the meaning of dependencies? So actually, it uses DI mechanism. DI mechanism means dependency injection. Dependency injection mechanism. Dependency injection means it will inject a value. Based on that injected value, it will reload the component. That means dependencies will tell when to reload the component again and again. The reloading of component, when it should happen again and again, that is managed by dependency. This already we discussed in routes. Already we implemented the logic in routes, right? How do we handle? Later you design such routes you can handle. Already I explained with example route parameters and all. For example, temporarily, I'm not giving a complete one because already we learned. Just I will show you a point. Suppose I'm writing here another component. So here effects component only. Let's put another. This example already given. Yeah, I will create this effects component. Just I will make it empty. All these are removed. Yeah. In this, what we are doing is simply I'm defining a component here. So export. So component is suppose shopping cart. Shopping cart is the component. So it is a function and it is shopping cart component. I told you component can have properties. It will return some div. Here we will put a span. So class suppose bi cart 4. And here I will use how to use properties. Remembered? We will use props. And how do we define the property here? The property is nothing but props dot. We need to define some reference. It's an object type na. So it uses some reference. What is that reference? So like suppose count, that is the reference. Props dot count. Usually this shopping cart component here, I am defining like this div, and we will put a button. So add to cart, like this I define. Now what will happen is add to cart, I will display somewhere in a div. So here I will put just class name as position absolute, and here I defined top 0, and I defined end 0, like this I added. And here I want to display the shopping cart component. Shopping cart component is added here. That means the shopping cart component is defined there. I will add this. So right side corner, that component is there. That is a separate component actually. So class, we have container, and margin 4, padding 4. Actually, it is having some gap here. Remember, this add to cart is a separate component and shopping cart is a separate component. Now what we need to do is here, whenever you pass shopping cart component, here we will pass a property. What is that property? Count. Count is equal to, we are sending the count here as suppose 0. That means the default shopping cart count is 0. That is 0 here. Count is sent and it is set to 0 here. Now what we will do is on this button click, this count should update. On button click, the count should update. So here we are configuring constant. So count is set count is equal to use state. Into the use state, we will put a 0, the value initialized. We will use that count value here. That means we will pass what? Count. That's what we are configuring. That means that is the count, and default value of count is how much? It is 0. Now what happens is on this button click, on click is add click, add click. Let's write a function here. And the function is what? Add click. On add click, what we will do? We will say set count. What is the value? Count plus plus. Count value is increased by 1 and it is set count. That means actually when I click add to cart, or I will put an alert saying that item added. Okay. I will do one thing. I will use a console log, console.log. In that I will put count plus plus. I am printing that in the console. Let's open the console, inspect. And here we are defining the console. So let's close this. Yeah, console. And in this console, I click on add to cart. That means item added. I said okay. And you can see cannot assign to constant. Why you cannot assign to constant? This is a constant variable, na? Plus plus is indicating what? Assigning, na? It is assigning. So what does this means? Count is equal to what? Count plus 1. It's not possible, na? You cannot assign. It is a constant, na? Now this you will understand. Now tell me how we can initialize. We can't assign. How you will initialize the value and store in that? We can do one thing. We can configure a local variable here. Am I right? That means we cannot use this. We can define a local variable. Local variable is var. Suppose C is equal to, what is it? Count plus 1. That means count value is increased by 1 and set count is C, and we will print C. It is doing that. That means count value is increased by 1. Now you see here, refresh. I'm clicking on add to cart, item added, and it is 1. I click on add to cart and it is added, it is 2. And you can see it is updating there. And you can see the properties updating here. There is no problem in that. This is what I asked you to try when I told you about shopping example. You remember that? I told you that cart separate component. Into the component you need to send the properties. You need to achieve that. Now this is okay because we are not using any routing. We are not using any routing. The parameters are directly passed and those parameters are assigned. That means whatever data is there, it is defined. That means what happening here is you are transporting the data from one component to another by using general, which properties we are using? We are using component properties. Understood? By using component properties, we are transporting the data. And that property is assigned here. That property is configured here. But suppose I want to manage this. I want to manage this using any use effect event. Count is directly updated here. No problem. That is not a problem. I am not using properties now. I am not using properties. I need to pass some value here without properties. I must able to access that value and use the value. That means, for example, just roughly I will tell you here. I'm not passing any properties now. That means this component is not having any properties, just the component is loaded. Right? So first I will give you this example so that it will be helpful for you. Suppose later we will do that by using routing concept. Then what will happen here is, here we are defining, simply a constant. So the constant is, constant. This is state. And on this is like some count. And what? Set count is equal to use state. Initially it is 0. And what we will do? So use effect. On use effect, what we are doing? On use effect, we are declaring some C is equal to count plus 1. After that, what? Set count, which value? C. And we are applying that count value here. The count value is C. See a counter. We'll use count. That means how many items are there in the cart, it is displaying there. Now on button click, I want to load this component. I want to load the component every time on button click. So on add click, I'm not doing anything. Just what I am doing, I need to load this component and display the component. Already previously we learned here what we will declare: component Which one? Set component, and use state, it is what type? String. And on add click, set component, I will put a component called, so that is which component? Shopping cart. This component will be defined. Okay. Now alert. So we are defining alert, and we will say component requested, or say cart requested. Suppose I defined cart requested. Now on add click here, we want to display the component. That means here we will just put no need of this at all. Now we will just put a div, and here we will access that component, whatever component is there. That means that component is requested every time when you click add. Right now, see what happens here in the design. I clicked on add click, cart requested, and okay, you can see the count is continuously incrementing. Why continuously incrementing? Because this is what happens if you don't mention dependency. If you don't mention the dependency. So is dependency mandatory or not? Several times people ask. Dependency is mandatory. If you don't mention the dependency, so you see here is no dependency mentioned. If dependency not mentioned, it will reload again. That means the reloading is not having a dependency, then it will reload infinity. Every second it will reload. So that means it is continuously reloading the function. It is continuously reloading the function. So if anybody asked you, if dependency is not mentioned, what will happen? If dependency not mentioned, whatever actions you defined in use effect, they will continue forever, like a batch program. I told you batch program. Na? I told you about batch program. NPM start is a batch program. You remember? That means it will continue forever. That means if dependency is not defined, this is very important. If dependency is not defined, then use effect, what it will do is, if dependency is not defined, then use effect will mount the component. So at regular intervals, it will mount the component at regular intervals until it is stopped. It is stopped. It will mount continuously at regular intervals. And what is the interval? That depends on your set timeouts. If you give timeout 5 seconds, every 5 seconds it will. So that depends on that. So that is the reason dependency is important. That means here what I am doing, here I am using dependency. If I define the dependency and you are not telling who is the dependent, if you are not telling who is the dependent, then it will run only once. That means you are not telling who is the dependents, then it doesn't know that to repeat. It says that I can't repeat because I don't know why I have to repeat. For which reason I have to repeat, reload. That means now what we are defining here, I click on that and I say cart requested and it is 1. I click on again cart requested and it is not 2. I click on it again cart requested, it is not 3. Because it doesn't know dependency, then how many times it will execute? Only once. Now how to tell dependency? Dependency is nothing but, here we will say that, so the C is dependency. The C is dependency. C is dependency means whenever the variable C changes. Variable C changes. So here C now, it says that C is not defined. Why? Because it is a variable now. Its a scope ends here. Am I right? It's a function scope. Its scope ends here. Now what is the scope for us? Count na? Dependency we given as count. That means here now I click on add to cart. Cart requested. You can see it is continuing again. Why it is continuing again? Because again the count is updated. And this count is repeating. Every few seconds the count is repeating. Because you clicked that and the count is going to continuously repeat. Again it will load. Again it will load. It will repeat the count because count is continuously increasing. After increasing, again it will assign. After increasing, again it will assign. That means it will be repeated. Same concept. But that's what you will learn. Actually, dependency, what we will send some route parameters. We will tell that don't load continuously. Load only when this particular action occurred. Later, we can put in route concept and implement. Already we learned route concept, right? That means we should not, if you don't mention the dependency, what will happen? If you don't mention the dependency, it will repeat again and again. If you don't want it to repeat, then what you do? So you have to define that count and you can see it will get that. So it will, actually it is refreshing. When you click on that, it should wait until this. So count technically is used for, dependency is technically used for to tell how many times it should repeat, when it should repeat, right? This is what I showed you when we passed route parameter. Then it will reload again. That one more example I will show you with another. We have a concept reducer redux. There also I will show you same concept, how it works. You can manage the functionality now, right? So generally, you just need to understand what will happen if the dependency is not defined. Dependency is not defined. And why we need dependency, where we need dependency, already we learned that examples, right? This is related to use effect. Already you used this regularly, but today you learned some more detailed concept about it. That means how to unmount, what is dependency, why we need dependency, and all these things. How to implement dependency in another example we will see, right? Next important, we have another hook called use context. Use context is another hook. In React hook, we have another hook called use context. So what is actually use context is nothing but technically. Generally, context refers to context memory. Actually, context refers to context memory of component. What is context memory means? In web applications, you will come across with cache memory, state memory, and context memory. These are common in web development actually. Suppose you are learning any server-side technologies, cookies, context, sessions, all these comes under server-side, JSP, PHP, .NET. You will come across with those. Actually, what is context memory? Context memory is nothing but the memory allocated for a component and the memory that is available for other components which run inside that component. That memory is called context. That means context memory is nothing but suppose we are having a parent component. For this parent component, a memory is allocated. A memory is allocated. For parent component, a memory is allocated. This memory for parent component, this memory is context memory. Context memory. In this memory, you can store any value. In this memory, we are storing some x equal to 10. Some value you are storing in that memory. Now what happens is we can have another one. So this is another memory. Yeah, we can have another. This is child component. This is child component. This is child component. Now what happens is this child component is also having its own context memory. Every component will have its own context memory. But important, the memory of parent can be made available to child. So that whatever the values are present in the parent, they can be used inside child. So use context defines memory for a parent component so that whatever you configure in the parent memory is accessible to all components at any level of hierarchy. At any level of hierarchy means later, suppose in this component, another component is there. That means in the child component, another component is there. That also can access this. That also can access this. That means the data available for the parent component can be shared to all child components at any level of child components. This is not directly possible. Suppose you declared a state and that state is not accessible to another component. That state is only for that component. Actually, what you have to do, we need to use properties now. Through properties, you have to pass data from parent to child. Without properties, you can make the data available in such a way that it is accessible by any hierarchy. It is accessible by any hierarchy. That is very important. For example, generally what happens is, suppose means a simple scenario I will explain here. The scenario is nothing but suppose you are using Amazon, Flipkart like pages. Usually what happens is they have a toolbar, navigation bar at the top. And they have some page. Remember, this is main component. This is the main component. In that they have header. Here after that, so here, suppose this is another component. This is another component. This is component like some cart or something. That means here we have another component like some cart. Now what happens is in this component, we provided some details like user ID, a text box, and password. So a text box and a button, some login button like this we define. Now what happens is when user ID password is entered and login is clicked, if login is successful, this user ID must be sent here. That must be available to that component. That means the data from parent component should be able to access by child. Then how the data is transported from parent to child? Now suppose in this cart, suppose there is another component, you can transport the data to that component also. At any level of hierarchy, you can send that information. This is possible if you can keep the data of parent in which memory? You can keep in which memory? You can keep in context. You have to create a context memory from the context memory. You can allow to transport the data. The data is transported from the parent to all other components. That is called context. So here there are so many things. First, we have to create context. After that, we have to use context. Context uses dependency injection. That means it uses a provider and it uses an injector mechanism. So context allows you to handle the situation of transporting data from one component to another in a parent-child hierarchy. That means from parent component, you can transport data to child. For that, we have to create context and make that context available to others. That is what we have to do. That is managed by this hook, that is use context, right? So it refers to context memory. That means actually context memory is created for parent and it is accessible all its child components at any level of hierarchy. That is the concept of parent and child. That is the concept of context. Right now, how this context works, we will see with example. One example we will design that we will see tomorrow. Right? Tomorrow we will discuss about use context, another one like use reducer, and some more hooks are there, how to work with them. That we'll see in next session. Okay. I will give some basic hooks which are regularly used. Other hooks, depending on project requirement, libraries you import. So I will give a separate document on hooks. Yourself. So I will give some hooks example here. Others you need to explore because we don't know which project, which component library they need, because based on that hooks will be changing. Already we learned formic, right? All those are Axios. All they will provide certain hooks. By using them, we can manage. That depends on third parties. Huh? So that you will see in the next session, we will discuss. Okay, right.